Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, from the run-up to the Nasrec in December, to former President Thabo Mbeki airing views on Ramaphosa's presidency, it's time to get an analysis of this political week, which also includes a conversation around Labour, a very significant Congress taking place from today. We're joined by political analyst Professor Sipho Seepe. Professor, good morning, and thank you very much for your time. You know, just looking across the globe, if we were to start with just Labour, if we start with what's happening today with Cosatu, just looking across the globe, we've seen a significant shift in the bargaining power of organised labour. Cosatu has not been spared, but if we had to start with the current leadership, outgoing leadership, how have they fared in terms of their ability to confront the issues that the proletariat is faced with today?
I don't think they've done much. What we should have heard, like you, in the last few years, like you rightfully indicate, that there's a global change in terms of the nature of work. And that and also coronavirus has also challenged this notion of 24/7 type of work, or 8 hours a week. We have what you call gig economy, where people are only invited as when they are required. And we have people now, instead of working 5 days, they're working 3 days. And also we had a lot of job losses. So we have more people who are unemployed. And the question is whether the Cosatu has, as representing the proletariat and the working class, whether it has changed its own approach. And when you listen to Cosatu, they simply say they can only represent the workers who are registered. And often it becomes very difficult to even cater for the ones who are working part-time because they don't fit nicely into the scheme of Cosatu. So to that extent, Cosatu still has a way to go before it can represent people who are working, whether it's part-time, whether it's or those who are in the gig economy. But it has been a challenge for the working class all over the world.
Their proximity to the ruling party has been quite a talking point of late. Many saying perhaps they need to cut their losses. It's been of no benefit to the working class. Your view on this, or is it us, maybe perhaps even the media, that constantly wants to have them pronounce themselves on political issues as opposed to the workers' issues in most instances?
The relationship between Cosatu and the ruling class and the ruling party goes far back. And it is not going to be very easy for them to simply jump ship or move out. And what they have tended to do is to endorse whoever becomes a president of the ANC. And we saw that happen also in 2017 when they endorsed Ramaphosa, despite the fact that the President Ramaphosa was very clear that he is a person who is more pro-business. And in the last 5 years, he has made those pronouncements to the extent that the Cosatu itself had to take a position against him. For instance, when he said that it is not the government's responsibility to create jobs, but it is business, it was Cosatu that jumped and simply saying, but that's not what we understand. And also the role of the SOEs, which Cosatu sees as very important in terms of building a developmental state. At the moment, there's a privatization that Cosatu is opposed to. But Cosatu cannot blame President Ramaphosa, at least on this one. He has been very consistent in terms of where he stands.
But beyond that, that has been the sentiment of some in the business space who say that there is this argument that when undertaking the process of policy formulation, big business should be considered greatly because they're supposed to be the creators of employment. I mean, just your view on that. Are you of the view that government still needs to take up the responsibility?
There's no doubt about the role of business in the creation of jobs. And there's no debate around the role of government to put policy and to regulate. This is why the relationship between government and business has always been, at one time is antagonistic, at that time is collaborative. And the collaboration is really around to say we understand the important role that you must play, and we also understand that we must create an environment that makes it easy for business to do to create jobs. So the notion of creating an enabling environment is what government has been saying. And that also includes making it easier for small businesses to register. Because one of the things that businesses always complained about is that even when investors come here and they want to invest in this country, there is a red tape in terms of registration, in terms of them having to function. And government has also come up with what at the time called a one-stop shop, where within a period of a month, those who want to invest could actually start getting their business on track. But that has been more an intention than a reality. And this is where business is unhappy with government. But at the same time, the unions are also saying, we also expect the government that we support to make sure that the exploitative patterns that you find in business are also addressed. So you'll always find this continuous tension, hence the notion of collaboration, as at the same time it will also be a position where there's an antagonistic relationship.
Mm-hmm. And perhaps it would then beg the question of Cosatu's power within the alliance itself, that do they still wield the same amount of power? Because if we just look at the turnout of the most recent protests, I mean, Labour maintains it sent a strong message to government, but many have said it was by no measure a national shutdown. It was, to a certain extent, according to some, even a failure.
Well, there's no doubt that Cosatu is very weakened. But one should also indicate that even the ruling party itself is weakened. If one were to use the numbers who gather around stadiums where there are important days, that tells you that the numbers have actually dwindled. So in as much as Cosatu has lost its muscle in terms of numbers, I don't think the ruling party itself has can claim the level of confidence that it used to have. You look at the people attending some of its rallies, the numbers have actually shriveled. But you also see the party also rejected in the polls. The mere fact that you can have the president of the country being booed by workers who had actually endorsed his presidency on the important day of a mayor rally, that indicates that the relationship itself is problematic. But at the same time, the fact that it's problematic is also part of the game that they play. It's what some people call a dialectical relationship, where you influence and you're also influenced. So I don't think Cosatu is ready to jump ship. They always make that noise that we are going to abandon the ANC. But come election time, they come around. And there's nothing that I see that suggests that they're going to behave differently.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of election time, it's upon us. I mean, 2 months to go before that all-important conference. If we just had to look at the pattern so far, it seems as if, again, we might be incorrect, but it seems as though that really the most contested position remains that of deputy. There's been very little appetite, deputy president. There's been little appetite to perhaps take over the position of SG. I mean, even in Gauteng, they didn't pronounce on a preferred candidate for SG. It was just DSG. And even the TG. What do you make of the picture that's starting to form?
Well, it is really around the notion of where the stakes are high. At the moment, the stakes are very high in terms of the presidency. And what we also know is that the incumbent often enjoys far greater almost opportunity and chance and the possibility of wielding or using the power of incumbency to be easily to work in his favor. And that's why you have not seen many people. And also you're talking about a president also who has an influence in terms of the resources. And there are people who have actually, how do you put it, invested a lot on his presidency. And in the past, we were told that he is the best thing that happened to South Africa. Now he's presented as the best of the West. Effectively, that those who catapult him into the position of the president, they still hold the view that he should serve second term. But that has always been almost a pattern that has been established, except Mandela is the only person who stepped down after the first term. Thabo Mbeki went for the second term. The former president, Jacob Zuma, also went for the second term. So you always see that the incumbent seems to have an advantage of going to the second term. But the deputy president is at least cumbersome, and then the stakes are not so high there. It is more what people use as a building step towards a presidency. And even here, even though you have many other people who have put their names, somebody like Paul Mashatile seems to enjoy a lot of support from a number of what they call slates, even though the party has said it had banned slates, but we see them continuously emerging and rearing their ugly heads.
And then this trend now of having PECs pronounce their preferred candidates before the branches. What do you make of this? Because I know Kgalema Motlanthe raised his concerns around this conduct because it suggests that it's no longer a conference of branches, but perhaps a preference of PECs who will then either lobby or some could even be negative and say impose their preferences on those at the bottom.
Well, Kgalema Motlanthe complains after the fact. What should have been much clearer is from day one, especially starting early when the chairperson of the province of Limpopo announced during a January 8th statement that they are going to support the current president for the second term. That should have sent a clear message that this is something that needs to be stopped. But for him to make a pronouncement after the fact, when there are a number of provinces that have said as much about President Ramaphosa, some people see it that Kgalema comes only when a different candidate is being proposed. So it may be an unfair characterization of what Kgalema is actually trying to do. But the point that you're also raising is really that the PECs are, of course, trying to, they are also a sphere of and a site of influence. By making this pronouncement, they are actually guiding without forcefully doing so to say the branches should do this. And Kgalema is correct to remind people, and this is a message that should continuously be said, that it is the branches that ultimately decide who leads the ANC. If that message is not repeated enough, then the PECs will get their wish, which is to influence the branches.
But the PECs are also quick to say, but we are a voting structure, so we're merely expressing our preference, but the branches can continue and vote as they see fit or nominate their preferred candidate. So what do we make of that when they constantly say, don't stop us from pronouncing, we are in essence also a voting structure?
Well, ultimately, it comes down to the point that you are raising, that and Kgalema is raising, that if the rules are not clear, and there seem to be gaps in them, people will take an advantage. Remember, what we're dealing here with is politics and human beings. And there's an element of ambition, both at the political level and at the personal level. And them being also a site of power, they'll want to make sure that they use that site of power or site of influence to make sure that it has an effect. And otherwise, they will, as they say, that why are we here if we're not going to provide guidance? And also, anyway, the PECs are also voted in by members of the ANC at the branch level.
Professor, thank you very much for your time this morning. That's political analyst Sipho Seepe.